invite you to spend the next half hour with Sri Klemp, the Mahanta, the Living Egg Master. As the spiritual leader of Ekankar, Sri travels worldwide, giving out the teachings of the light and sound of God.
I found that stories are a good way to give the message of Ek, because sometimes it's easier for us to just listen to a story. Now, I like to tell stories, but I also like to get into a lot of spiritual philosophy. Well, philosophy puts people asleep. Stories can too. But sometimes when they make us think about life from a different angle, at least it's worth a listen. Now, Laura Lee, she's from Canada, had a cat named Krabby. And guess why? The cat was mean, showed no consideration to anyone. But Laura Lee, in fact, she loved Laura Lee so much, she'd get under her feet so that Laura Lee would trip. Well, she had Krabby, the cat, for 9.5 years, and then Krabby passed on. Within a year, Laura Lee got a call from her son. Her son said, "Our cat has been in labor for 3 days and is having a very hard time. Doesn't look as if she's going to make it, nor any of the kittens either. Could you come over and see what you can do?" Laura Lee got the kitten straightened out, and pretty soon the kittens were being born one by one. And when kitten number 3 was born, there were 3 humans in the room, and they felt a presence immediately. They looked at the 3rd little kitten and they said, "It's Krabby. Krabby the cat's come back." One of the basic beliefs in Ekankar is reincarnation. Soul, you and I are soul, and this will be news for some people, is that animals are soul too. They, cats and dogs and birds, carry bodies the same as humans do. We wear a body like a suit. And when it gets old and worn out, we get rid of it. It's worn out. Soul then goes to the heavens, one of the heavens. St. Paul spoke of the 3rd heaven, meaning there are more than 1 and 2. Soul goes to one of these heavens, has experiences there in a body that fits that heaven. It's of the same vibration. In other words, it's of the same matter. This is important because otherwise people there couldn't see each other. It's important here because otherwise people here couldn't see each other if their bodies were composed of something other than physical material substance. And so later, the cat came over to Laura Lee's. Krabby came there, and had exactly the same mannerisms as she did in her old body as Crabby 1. But instead of being mean, she was kind and gentle and sweet to everyone. When Crabby 2 had a baby, had her kittens, Laura Lee kept none of them but one, and this they named Bear. Well, Bear does all these nice things, sits like a child, sleeps like a child, loves to play with the grandchildren when they come over, and he even knows how to play with toys and make them work. So he has a lot of fun with the grandchildren. And as I mentioned, he's the one who likes to say hello, good morning, goodbye, please, thank you, and other things like, I'm sorry. But more than that, he likes to give kisses and hugs. Maybe Bear was a good name for him because he liked to give little bear hugs. Well, one day, Laura Lee's stepmother came over, and her stepmom was feeling very sad because she was far away from her own family and missed them. And so the stepmom sat there, she began to cry. Bear came up to her and looked at her with the very saddest eyes that you can imagine a cat could look at you with. And he just looked at her, and as the tears came down Mom's face, he reached up a paw and wiped the tear from her eye. At this, the stepmom, she couldn't help but laugh, and everyone else in the room was laughing too, because Bear thought he was human. And so he did everything that the others did. He showed sympathy, and he gave the stepmom a hug beside wiping away her tear. And then, when even the stepmom had a laugh, because she realized that God's love is everywhere, well, then it seemed as if Bear was laughing too. See, God's love comes through all the people who have a golden heart. That means people with an open heart. That means people who love others more than they love themselves. Now understand, this does not mean that you think little of yourself. How could you? As soul, as a creation of God, you should have the very highest regard for yourself. You should love yourself in the highest, purest way, not in the low ways that many of you would normally associate with love, meaning pride and vanity. Love yourself as you would love God, and love others as you would love yourself. Because then you are truly loving all as God loves you. The lesson that Laura Lee got from this was that some animals, like people, have a high state of consciousness. because they are soul too. Stand back for a better look. This story is about red silk tulips. Joyce lives in the Midwest, in St. Louis, Missouri. And one cold January, about 10 years ago, or 10 years before this, she looked out the window and a heavy snow had fallen. So she went out to a shop, and while she was there, she noticed that they had bunches of these silk tulips. Bunches of silk tulips. Well, she said, these things aren't real, but anything that will bring a promise of spring might bring a ray of sunshine to my children. So she bought 6 or 7 bunches of these tulips. When she got home, she realized that she had 1 bunch left over. She didn't know what to do with it, but looking outside at the cold and the snow around her mailbox, she thought, this would be a good idea to just leave 1 for the mail carrier. And she did, and she pretty much forgot about the gift that she had given. Well, then 10 years passed. Her husband had passed on, or translated, as we say in Eckankar. And one day, his daughter had been at a gathering, and there she met the wife of the mailman. Well, the mailman, or the mail carrier's wife, expressed sympathy for the passing of her father and said, I'll never forget the man, or never forget the wife that your father was married to. And then she said, 10 years ago, she had been very, very sick and was facing a serious operation. And she asked God, she said, please give me a sign. Now, the sign she asked for is like really asking for it. Like, it's the middle of January, ice cold then. And then she asked for, God, if I'm supposed to survive this operation, bring me some flowers. She didn't get flowers, and the chance of getting any in January put the odds very much against her. But that's what the mail carrier's wife asked of God. It happened to be that very day that Joyce had this extra bunch of red silk tulips. And it was that day that she gave them to the mail carrier. Well, the mail carrier's wife, now these 10 years later, said that when her husband came home and walked in the door with the red tulips, she knew that God had answered her prayer. The operation would be a success. And it was a success. The woman had since lived a healthy life. The lesson for Joyce, the Holy Spirit, the Ek, works through us to bring love and assurance to people we may never meet. Stand back for a better look. This story is from Nigeria. There has been much political turmoil in that country, and the members of Eckankar have gained from the spiritual lessons that occur during times of hardship. Now, I don't know how better to say it, but people learn spiritual lessons better when times are hard. Now, America, the United States of America, has been enjoying an unprecedented boom. Some call it a bubble, for many years, with one dip in the early 90s. And so people lose their ability to listen to the voice of God. Things are so good. They can buy so many things. Bigger TV sets. Soon, even in America, high-definition TV. I know some of you are laughing in Europe because you have it already. And computers, let's not forget computers. It's possible to go into the virtual world of a computer and get totally absorbed in an unreal world, so that it no longer matters whether the sun shines or the rain falls. Oh yeah, we go to work, but we come home after work. It's more computers. Computers at work, computers at home, computers early, computers late. Computers, computers. When it's not computers, it's TV or movies. We're virtually alive. Or another way of saying it is, we're virtually dead, spiritually. I know this comes as a shock, but I realized too, as I spent, about 12 years on a computer before I got sick in 1994 and wasn't able to use a computer anymore. I learned how it had absorbed all my time. I was online, the internet was just coming on, and I was on the internet looking around. I was in chat rooms, talking with many of you, with dream classes, dream rooms. I did that, I've been there. But I got out of it in one piece. Barely. Barely. Anyway, back to Nigeria and the man who learned something about something very down to earth. He learned a spiritual lesson through some baby chicks. It was one night in November. A heavy rain fell, a very heavy rain. Sometime during the night, a woman came to a neighbor of his and said she'd found 3 little chicks. They were separated from their mother. Did this woman know anyone who owned chicks of this particular kind? Well, the woman did. She came to the Nigerian man, the Ekast, and said, I know you have chicks like that. Are these yours? He looked at him and says, no, I wish they were, but they're not. Well, the woman said, would you please take care of them? They were about 3 days old. They were peeping, they were cold, they were hungry. And it looked as if they weren't going to make it through the night. So this good man, he pours out his heart to these 3 little chicks. He gives them food and he gives them drugs and vitamins. He also warmed the room for them. All he had was a kerosene lamp for warmth. Kerosene was very expensive then. You may find this odd. Nigeria is one of the bigger producers of petroleum products in the world. But their people don't have enough petroleum products. So it was very expensive. But he kept the lantern lit all night. He took care of the chicks. Well, when morning came, he said he'd look around for the mother hen and for the owner. But he didn't look very hard because he sort of thought of keeping the chicks for himself if they made it. A week later, his landlady was an Eckes too. And she said, oh, I'm so glad you found it. My hen had 6 chicks and lost all of them in the rainstorm, but you found 3 of them. Would you take care of them until they grow up? Well, it's been a week, and today is Saturday. And he looked and he saw that the Eckes wasn't taking care of the chicks. They needed to be fed. But suddenly he lost his interest in the chicks because they could not be his. He had told the landlady, no, I won't take care of them. But when she didn't feed them, he did feed them grudgingly. Well, the next day was Sunday, and our friend, the Eckes, went to the worship service at their local Eck Center. As they were there, after the talk, the group did a Hugh song. The Hugh song is a love song to God. And during this Hugh song, as he sat there with his eyes shut, the Mahanta, the inner master, spoke to him. The Mahanta said, what kind of love do you think you're giving to the chicks? You gave love when you thought them yours. When you found out they weren't yours, you withdrew this so-called love. And yet you're always asking the Master to show you how to give divine love, to serve life. Now you waste a chance. Later you'll again ask for ways to serve God. So after the Eck service was over, he went to the Eck woman and said, I'd be happy to take care of the chicks for you. And the woman had said, if any survive, you can have one of them. That's what had made him so angry in the first place. It's when our feelings are hurt that we close our heart. This Nigerian man was hurt too. He had saved the 3 chicks. The landlady now says, oh, if they survive, you can have 1. 1 out of 6. And he's thinking, 1 out of 6. What good's that? He thought of all the money he'd spent, all the time he'd invested in these chicks. After 3 days, they had recovered and they were doing very well. And then along comes the landlady to claim them as her own. Oh, all the money he spent. What kind of offer is that? 1 chick. Yeah, he was hurt. So he closed his heart. And then the Mahanta, the living Ek Master, spoke to him through the inner communication. The Master said, what kind of love is that? What kind of love is that? You see, true love has no strings attached to it. No strings. If you want truth, you must step back. That's what the talk's been about this morning. Learn to see more than other people do. You do this by putting your attention on God. In Ek, we do it through the spiritual exercises. In other religions, people do it through meditation or prayer. Whatever you do to make a closer link with God, do it. It's very important. You're here, as well as your neighbor, to learn something, or you wouldn't be here. I'd like to thank you for coming. And I would like to give you the blessings of the Viragi Ek Masters. May the blessings be. Thank you.